Hello there guys, welcome back to I Can't Witch Without, the series in which every week I take a look at something which is a part of my practice. And that could be a herb, a crystal, we have looked at books before, and so on and so forth. And this week I thought we'd do something a little bit different and take a look at oracle decks and talk a little bit about oracle decks and what oracle decks mean to me in my path. So the precursor to this video is that you do not require any of the items in order to be a witch. It's not what the series is about. It's just taking a look into how I feel about certain items, my thoughts, my experiences, really just how I feel about my path and bits and pieces that make up some of that path. And I thought we'd have a look at oracle decks just to be a little bit different, a little bit of something, changing it up a little bit. This week's Working Witch is already available on the Starry Eyed Facebook page, so there's a few bits this week. I had it request to make a video or post on the Facebook page about what I mean by imbue, so that's already on the Starry Eyed page. There are two posts on the Starry Eyed Facebook page, www.facebook.com/Starry Eyed Supplies. I'll put the link in the down bar, as well as this week's Working Witch, which is a bath spell recipe. So all of that is already available online for your online Book of Shadows, that sort of thing. So that's all available on there, and therefore we shall carry on and talk a little bit about oracle cards. So oracle cards are different from tarot cards. Tarot cards tend to be much more structured. In the traditional tarot there is 78 cards broken down into 22 major arcana and 56 minor. The minor arcana are then typically broken down into the suits, ace to 10, and then it tends to be page, knight, queen, king, although that can shift a little bit, and the suits tend to be pentacles, wands, swords and cups, although again those can fluctuate a little bit. The structure tends to be more or less the same. In my favourite deck, the Wild Unknown, it has mother, father, son and daughter rather than the traditional royal outlook, I guess. And I know that the Wooden Tarot, for example, shifts which suits are actually used. There are still 4 suits, so it just shifts one into another. I think bones is one, and something. I haven't got the set myself, so although I have looked at it. So there tends to be this structure with regards to tarot, and there tends to be, but not always, the same major arcana cards as well. Sometimes decks do shift cards. I've known quite a few decks to take the devil card out of the tarot and replace it with something else. And my first tarot deck that I really connected with, which was I think the Druid Wicca Tarot, something along those lines, which I have since long lost to the flow of time and moving home and everything. That was one of those that shifted it out, and it said that the devil didn't fit with the druidic theme. So there are decks that do that take things out and shift things about, but generally speaking you'll get the same cards, and it's just the artist's interpretation of that card, and it leads to some very differing art. There are many tarot decks. However, oracle decks, which is what we're going to focus on today, there tends to be less rules. There isn't a set number of cards, and the theme and the images presented are largely up to the artist. There is no sort of guidebook for how oracle cards are presented. They're much freer in the way that they allow the artist and the person writing each interpretation of each oracle card to really go with their imagination, where spirit guides them, how they feel when they're painting and writing these things. And it really becomes a lot less structured. It's just it's a little bit like a free-for-all, and you will find so many oracle decks, it's ridiculous. You'll find things with angels. There are an awful lot of mythological creatures, you know, fairies in particular is a strong favourite within the metaphysical community for oracle cards. You get animals, you get trees, you get angels, you get sort of abstract art, you can get all sorts. The deck in front of you is my favourite oracle deck, which is the Connected and Free Alchemist Oracle deck by Inner Hue. And I've got all my other decks around me so I can just show you some examples of other ones before we get into it. But this oracle deck, since it was bought for me for my birthday, I have drawn a card from it every single day. It's touched my soul in a way that no other oracle doc has. No other oracle deck has docked at my heart the same way, although some get close. So I'm going to show you some other examples and some unique ideas. So technically the Love Spells deck and the Spell deck are oracle cards. They follow the fashion where each card is a spell. So you've seen me review these before if you've been with the channel. They're absolutely gorgeous. These are the Love Spell ones, so that's what the Love Spells deck looks like, and then this is the normal Spells deck, and they do unfortunately have some crossover. Some of the same spells are in both. So they take the line of applying a spell to each card that you draw, which is a really nice way of getting into the practice of looking at spells early on and refreshing your memory later on as well, of course, and just sort of thinking about how you would do it. So it gets you thinking along the lines of a witch in terms of practical spell work as well. And then I have another deck which kind of does that, which is the Witchlings deck with these cards, and this is the box. The art by Paulina Cassidy. I love her artwork, that's why I got the cards, and I did work with them a little bit. I sort of ended up feeling a little bit put off from them. It just felt a little bit overly sweet and overly childlike, and even the spells were sort of overly basic. But in their book you get this little book of spells, and you get sort of spell work for each card. So it's not an unusual idea within the breadth, I guess, of oracle decks for there to be spells and things of that nature attached. I really like the Witchlings for the fact that it incorporates witches and just witches, and it has some unusual artwork, but generally speaking it's not a deck that really sort of kept my interest, I suppose you could say. Right, let's just look at the okay, and then I have the Oracle of the Shapeshifters, which is I believe the written book is by Lucy Cavendish, and the artwork is obviously Jasmine Beckett Griffith, who is well known for her particular artist style. And there you go. So it's a very iconic image, and I did enjoy these cards. I just again, they didn't speak to me in the same way. I do enjoy them. I occasionally get them out of their little cloth and have a look at them. But again, it didn't really resonate completely. And then the next two do. But however, I view them in a bit of a different way than I normally view oracle decks. So then I have the Celtic Tree Oracle, and I have the original with the box and then the trees. However, I kind of view the Ogum as a separate entity to oracle cards, and whereas these are technically oracle cards, I tend to view them in the same energy as I do the Ogum. So when I'm doing tree work or Ogum work or divination with the Ogum, it's almost like having a different mindset to when I'm working with oracle cards. And I know that sounds a bit bizarre, but it makes perfect sense in my head that when I'm working with tree energy, it's a very specific part of my Celtic path, whereas when I'm working with cards, it feels different. So for me, this deck and the next deck, in fact, they tie into a different energy field almost. It might just be me being weird, but that's how I feel about it. So the last deck that I'm going to show you before we talk about the one in front of you is the Druid Plant Oracle, which we talked about. Oh, they're all upside down. Hang on. Which we talked about quite a bit lately. And these are beautiful, big, artistic cards. And again, they feed into that Celtic path where I feel differently about them than I do to divination cards, to tarot cards and oracle cards. So it's an odd one for me, but oracle cards and my Celtic specific cards sort of play a different role within my path. I come to oracle cards for that sort of, I guess it feels more like being in the ether, being in the realm of spirit, it's almost like a mysticism, whereas the energy of the druidic plants and the druidic trees and the Ogum and all of that feels very much like being very rooted, but it's still spiritual, incredibly spiritual, but it's much more rooted, it's much more of a magic, it's much more of a physical witchcraft element to it, whereas the oracle cards feel a little bit more etheric, if that makes sense. I know what I mean, but putting it into words is really apparently quite difficult. Right, so as I was saying, the difference between oracle cards is they have a much broader scope. They're not as structured. They don't have they don't tend to have this numeric value. You don't expect certain cards to come after certain cards. You don't expect certain suits or certain families of cards, and you don't expect the particular meanings attached to particular, say, suits or numbers within oracle decks. It's much more of a madness. It's much more chaotic. It's much more up in the air, and it allows for perhaps a much easier access to putting your own symbolism and meaning into each card. Because when you're learning about the tarot, you get to know first and foremost what the cards mean, and you will come across general guides for what certain cards mean, and so you know that tens are sort of end cycles and a fulfillment of some kind, and you get to know what the numbers mean, and then you sort of apply that to each and every tarot deck that you have. Now you will form a different relationship with each tarot deck that you have for certain, and each different tarot deck will have a different energy, a different feeling, a different way of addressing you even, or a different way of speaking, but you have those sort of structures in mind when you are applying your own meaning to it. So it's a little bit more structured and rigid and within a box, and that's not a bad thing whatsoever, but it's different to how oracle cards are. Oracle cards are sort of the wild card. They can be anything. They are what the artist / author has decided is important they made the decisions about which imagery and what the meaning was for that imagery and what they say the interpretation of each card is. But I think oracle cards allow for much more of a personal interpretation. For me, I've picked out 4 of my absolute favourite cards, and I want to talk about each of them a little bit more. And I think this is how, highlighting how this particular deck really touched my heart. I saw the images and I absolutely knew that I needed these oracle cards, which I have not had really with an oracle deck outside of the Celtic druidic plant and Ogham energies, and I knew I wanted those, but they, like I said, have a very different energy to me to oracle decks, and oracle decks being more whimsy, more up in the air, maybe perhaps broader in scope as well. When I'm working with the Ogham, it feels very much about my Celtic path, my witchcraft, my hands in the earth, that sort of energy, whereas these cards, these oracle cards, can be about anything, any aspect of the day. It doesn't have to necessarily be the witchcraft, although obviously witchcraft flows through all of my life. It doesn't necessarily have to be the Celtic part, if that makes sense. So I picked these cards on purpose because they are my favourites, some of my favourites. I had about 10 absolute favourites, and I was like, we're going to have to condense this slightly and choose 4. And I chose these 4 because I think each of them spoke to me on a soul level without ever having read the book. And I think that's an important thing for an oracle deck in particular to do, because you want them to speak to your soul on such a level that you're getting meanings before you've even read the book, before you're aware of the artist or author's interpretation of that art. It's a little snippet into your soul state, into your mind, into the way you react with symbolism and how you really feel about these things. And it tells you a little bit about yourself and your path. Even before you've really looked at the cards in terms of divination, it's starting to form that bond with who you are as a person, who you are as a witch, and you know when you link into that imagery in a much stronger way, perhaps even more so with oracle decks than, say, tarot, because you have no idea what to expect from an oracle deck. So when each and every card is like hitting that sweet spot with you, you know that that oracle deck is for you. And it has taken me until this point to find an oracle deck in the ether that really speaks to me. And I've been looking since I can remember, longer than I perhaps want to admit. Over 10 years, you know, maybe about 15 years. I just, oof. And it took until this point for this oracle deck to grab me by my fingernails and be like, oh my god, to the point where I was so excited, I was looking at the cards every single day until I could get them ordered, because they were out of stock for a couple of weeks until I could order them. And when they came, they were for my birthday, and when they came I was like, I'll just check that each and every card is here and everything's fine, and then I'll put them away until my birthday. I must have looked through the cards a few times before my birthday, and that's really bad and really unusual for me, because normally I'm not like that at all. But with these cards, I was like, I just want to have a look. And if I was having a really bad day, I was like, I'll just go have a naughty look at these cards and I'll feel better. So there was already this really strong attachment to these oracle cards. I just found that it spoke to me. This deck, the Connected and Free Alchemist Oracle deck, has been referred to as the estranged cousin of the Wild Unknown, and I guess that might be part and parcel of why I loved it so much. The imagery from the Wild Unknown spoke to me on such levels, and I am a huge lover of oracle decks which do not contain humanoids in any shape or form. and that's unusual. That's part and parcel of why I'm so attached to the Wild Unknown, and it's part and parcel of why I'm attached to this deck. I can't tell you why that's the case, that the being humanoids in the way kind of gets in the way of the message for me. I can't tell you why that is, but clearly I prefer animals and plant life and trees in my spiritual decks, and that's just a personal thing, and working out that personal preference is obviously something you need to do when choosing or looking at oracle cards. The internet's great for this now. You can usually see the images a lot clearer, there's a lot more information available, which of course makes it harder for people selling oracle decks, because I don't know if it makes it harder because there's so much competition, or if it's both, because it makes it harder because there is so much competition, but on the other hand it means that you as a smaller artist can get your artwork out there and people interested in buying them. So I guess that's one facet of modern living and two ways of looking at it, really. So, but anyway, you can go on the internet and you can Google most images from a lot of oracle decks and really get a feel for the artwork, at least online, from a visual perspective, before you buy. Once you have the deck, you'll get a feeling for it and you'll get an energy from it, and it's almost like developing a relationship with it, and that's a different part of forming a bond with your oracle cards, which is mainly through use, as well as the connecting to each image through looking at it, feeling it, holding it, even jotting down notes, talking out loud. What do I see in this card? What does this card make me feel? And so on and so forth. But to really get into that, I'm going to talk about each of these 4 images in front of you. So let's move these over here and turn them over until, this one's a bit bright, so hopefully it'll focus. Okay. So when I looked at the original deck, the Strength card was one of my least favourites, and I was really quite disappointed by it. When I first saw the first edition version of the Strength card, it was a lion's face with a mandala around it, the Flower of Life mandala, I believe. Just as this is a lion's face with a mandala around it, but it was more cartoony. It was very cartoony. I didn't like the cartoony visual that was part and parcel of the lion card, the Strength card. Now the lion card is something that comes up in tarot as well as part of the Strength. It's not always a lion, but I do enjoy lion imagery a great deal. I am a big lover of big cat energy and cat energy in general, and when I opened the cards to check they were all okay, I came across this and I gasped, and I could have cried, because it was a complete change. It was a more realistic drawing. It was less colour in the face of the lion, so it allowed the colour in the mandala to stand out, as well as the structure and the artistry and the pencil work in the lion face to really stand out. It was such a huge change for me. It was such a moment of absolute bliss for me that I actually contacted the lady, the artist, Inner Hugh, on Facebook. And I'd been in contact with her a little bit anyway, just to express my excitement and ask about delivery and, you know, the everyday stuff. But I had to contact her and say, you know, it was one of my least favourite cards before, and now it's one of my favourites. I think this is an absolutely incredible, amazing change. And that's a little story that's going to stay with me throughout using these oracle decks. That moment of pure joy is going to be with me every time I look at this card. I'm going to remember that. I have that memory, that feeling every time that I look at it. And that moment of bliss and joy becomes a strength. So it ties into the meaning, it taps into the meaning, because it's being strong and learning strength is learning to see the joy in situations as well. So that was a little side story about this particular card, which I thought I would share and helps towards getting personal meaning. So the first card I actually ever saw for this oracle deck was the fox card. I'm a big lover of foxes, as people will be well aware. If you're on my Facebook page, then you know about the squishable fox family that we have here and the daftness of it. And this card is heart. So the squishable foxes and their many adventures on Facebook and the pictures we take and the daftness represents something that it came under fire recently, and I didn't realise I needed to explain being silly. However, I did. So the squishable foxes and the fun and the silliness and the daftness of it is to do with looking after my inner child. I'm a survivor of domestic and parental sexual abuse. So I didn't have much of a childhood. And I spent most of my childhood taking care of my sisters in more of a mother role than I should have. So to this day, I need those things. I need that silliness. I need that play. And I think as adults, we all do. We absolutely all do need to really get down and be silly and play games and really rediscover our inner child, because blocking it out is really a painful thing for our soul. So this card speaks to me of that, what that means to my heart, what the fox means to my heart in terms of those squishable foxes, as well as an energy of spiritual heart as well. So the first time I ever saw this card, I was like, I need to see the rest of these cards because this is amazing. And there's something about the structure and the curled up and the warmth. It means home to me, basically, and home is where the heart is. So there you go. And then we have Standstill, which is an absolutely insanely beautiful card. My favourite time of the day is sunset into dusk, which I've talked about on a number of occasions, I believe. Sunset into dusk is my power time, basically. I feel most alive when the sun is starting to go down, in the dusk, in the early evening. I feel more alive at that point than at any other point in the day. I love it. It goes towards the autumnal thing as well, autumn being the dusk of the year, and feeling more alive at that time. So this card really speaks to me on a soul level. It represents how my soul and heart feel at that point. And everything does seem more still at dusk. There's this silence, this stillness, this perfection for a moment every single day. And so this card speaks to me on that level. It takes a part of something that I already held dear and put it into the oracle deck and then gave it a meaning within a divination. And last but not least, of course, is Mr. Raven for communication. And then you've got eyes everywhere. So ravens and crows are obviously a huge part of my Celtic path, with Mama Morrigan and her crows and ravens and the crow shenanigans that make me giggle on a daily basis. They follow me around, basically. And communication here then becomes not only the chatter of crows and ravens, and if you've watched the autumn equinox video, you know that they talk. Gosh, do they talk. But it's more than that. It becomes messages from Mama Morrigan. It becomes messages of divination. It becomes messages from spirit guides, because they can see the past, present and future, and that's nice with the eyes in the card. And there's this red outline and that sort of that hue that it's almost a Morrigan war crow in there. You can almost see that idea. You can see the full breadth of the bird with its, you can see all of its wings and its feet, and yet it's a little bit closed. It's sort of speaking to the message of the card. You know, sometimes you need to be open and speak out, and then sometimes you need to consider what you're saying. And so it really does tie into my path in such a way that no other oracle card has in the past. Oracle deck, all of the cards do. So oracle decks on the surface of it do the same thing as tarot decks in perhaps a more simplified fashion. Oracle decks are for the purpose of divination. They are for asking questions about the unknown and getting to know yourself in terms of a spiritual path, in sort of looking inward, if you want. And as we approach that way, and this is at the forefront of our minds in the Northern Hemisphere at least. So the popular method with oracle cards, and certainly not the only method, but the very popular method is to shuffle your oracle cards and choose one card for the day. This is done on social media sites, on Facebook, on YouTube, on Instagram, on, all of them. And it's a very popular method because it's not as time consuming as a fuller spread. And you can do larger spreads with oracle cards. However, for me, one oracle card a day is just the favoured way of doing it. It's simple, it's easy, it's not time consuming, it gives you a direct message, it tells you what you need to know for the day, and gives you an overarching theme of the day, things to highlight and pay out attention for that you might have missed, or to really give you a goal and something to think about and something to incorporate into your daily life. I'm going to find a card. Hang on a minute. I'm going to have a look for a card that I've had a lot recently. I think it's at the bottom because I have had it so much recently, which, yeah, it is. So I've had this card come up quite a lot recently, which is Slow Down, which is the snails. Let's just pop it on top for a minute. And it's come up a few times recently, and it's basically, to me anyway, become synonymous with the fact that you need to take care of yourself. You're trying to do too much. You're pushing the boundaries of your health. And this time of year for me is a difficult time of year with regards to my head, because in sort of season changing is migraine season. For anybody who suffers with genetic migraines like I do, you know all about it. It's not fun. So Slow Down has come up a few times lately, like just take a breath, just look after yourself, just don't push yourself too much. Don't stop. It's not a stop card, but it's a, take care of yourself, be aware of yourself, and enjoy things a little bit more. Don't be rushing, don't be panicking, don't be getting yourself in a tiz. Just take it easy, slow down, have that cup of tea, take a deep breath, go out into nature, keep on working, keep on videoing, keep on doing what you do, but just calm down a bit, alright? Just calm down. And these cards have this amazing energy. They're like an old friend. It's like talking to an old friend with them, even though they obviously are a relatively new tarot deck. That I've had them since my birthday, 4th of September. Well, a little bit longer than that technically, but I wasn't supposed to. And that's what good oracle cards and indeed tarot cards should feel like. Like they have their own personality. The personality comes from a number of sources, I would say. Firstly, the energy that's put into them by the artist, the time, effort and work that is put into them. They have their own soul. And I say this about my witchcraft items, and I would say that would probably go doubly so for art, because art is a little portal. Well, no, because my art, all art can do this, so it doesn't really matter what form it takes, but it's a portal into a state of being, a state of mind. It shifts how you think, it shifts how you see things, it's elevating your vibrational level, because you're taking that art and you are diving into it and getting something from it and looking at it and feeling it and thinking what it makes you feel and what it makes you remember, or apply to the situation that you're in. It's making you think outside the box a little bit. So it can be hugely beneficial to just make that part of your everyday routine, that you just choose a card for the day and see where that takes you. It's like a little doorway into your day, a little beginning, a little birth every morning with an oracle card. So most oracle cards will come with a book. This is the book for the Connected and Free Alchemist Alchemist Oracle. It's me reading through the camera, it kind of skits me up there, I don't know. And then they will have sort of suggested reading. So that is their free fall suggested reading. They usually recommend a 3-card spread for past, present and future, or a 1-card. Something that comes really beautifully in this particular is talking about cleansing cards, which people don't always do. Just like crystals, it's important to care for your cards. Everything holds energy, and your cards will hold a distinct energy which over time will absorb your beautiful and unique vibration as well. Like everything, there are multiple ways to cleanse and clear energy. And then some suggestions: in the full moon, in the direct light, in the breath, with crystals. And then it talks about other things like reading for others. So, and then I'm going to show you, this is the page for the fox heart. And what I absolutely adore about this particular booklet is down the bottom she suggests crystals you can use when working with each card. I wouldn't necessarily apply those to the cards, however, it's something you can do. And if you start off with the crystal suggested in the book for each card, then you can then apply your own as time goes on, and you feel the energies out and feel which crystals you think really correspond to each particular card, and maybe use that for the rest of the day. You know, pop it down your bra or in your sock or whatever, and carry that crystal with you for the rest of the day, and take that energy into the rest of your day. So you're applying a little bit of magic, I'm knocking the camera, and a little bit of structure into your day, and bringing witchcraft in all sorts of ways just by utilising oracle cards. I'm not going to talk at length about tarot readings or anything like that, other than how they vary, which I've already covered, because we'd be here all day, and this is a fairly long video as it is talking about oracle cards. But I think it's well worth looking for an oracle deck which truly speaks to you, because it can really change your life. And that's not an overstatement. This particular oracle deck has changed my life, and if I was only allowed to take one oracle deck I would cry, but I would take this one. And it speaks to me. It has its own story, its own rhythm, its own energy, and it's something completely different. It's wonderful, and I highly recommend it. So that's it for this week's work. I Can't Witch Without. And like I said, the Working Witch this week is on the Facebook page. Many blessings.